All right, hi everyone, and welcome in. Today we have the eighth episode today of the Titans of Fantasy Football podcast. Got another exciting episode here for you guys today. As the last two previous episodes before this, we are running through divisions right now, and today we have the NFC West. So excited to get through this group of teams, which includes the Super Bowl champions from this past year. But I'm your host, Garrett Daigle. With me, as always, my co-host, Caleb Armstrong. We're here. We're ready.
We're here.
We're excited.
I don't know, Garrett. I think this is going to be more of an interesting podcast than this one. NFC West, I don't know if you guys really know, took some bullets this year. There was some big trades in it. Two really huge trades. One helping a team, one kind of affecting a team. But it's kind of like I don't know. I feel like there's some powerhouse fantasy options, and then there's like some.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because like our previous two, when we did AFC West, like that's a powerhouse division.
Yeah.
AFC East, that's a division that's building up right now, and you see all these teams starting to acclimate, grab players, and they're trending up.
Yeah.
NFC West is such a weird grab bag of mixed teams that you kind of don't. They're not as predictable right now.
No, I'd agree with you.
Yeah.
I think you got something special in store today, right, Gary? We got different. We're gonna start off things a little different than normally. Usually, we give you guys some news, and right now we're kind of like we talked about later on. We're kind of that like dead period. There hasn't been a whole lot of news. I guess the only news that I'm willing to even share right now is today. It doesn't sound like Dalton Schultz's contract is going to happen. So I guess that's just one thing to keep an eye out. I mentioned something about how. Maybe you look at Jake Ferguson if anything more comes about it, if he's like shipped at all or moved. But, I mean, that's the only thing really for news right now that we got, Garrett.
I mean, about an hour ago, my dad sent me a text saying Odell Beckham signing with the Packers.
Yeah, that was fake.
That was fake news.
Thanks, Big Lee.
Big Lee. Can't trust them.
No.
But yeah, like Caleb said, we're going to try something new to start this episode. We're going to go through a little game of this or that, a good old-fashioned Would You Rather. So I'm going to list off a couple players, and Caleb's going to tell me what he thinks of the groups and which one he would rather have. So let's get it started. First two I've got is, would you rather have Waddle, Jalen Waddle, and Dak Prescott, or Herbert and Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I'm going Waddle. Waddle and Dak. I feel like there's not that much of a drop-off between Dak and Herbert, and I feel like there's a bigger drop-off between Waddle and Amon-Ra. And like I said, I'm a little higher probably than others on Amon-Ra or than on Jalen Waddle right now. I truly feel like he will be the number one guy still, even though Tyreek got the money, he's getting paid, he's big. I just feel like Waddle's there. I don't know. Hot take again, but also Amon-Ra was so good last year because there was no one. And this year, even starting off, it will be a very different offense. They re-signed Josh Reynolds. They brought in DJ Chark. Quintez Cephas is still there. It might be a cut. We don't really know there. TJ Hawkinson's back and healthy. DeAndre Swift's back and healthy. Jamal Williams is back and healthy. I mean, this is going to be a different offense. I mean, yeah, I remember when Amon-Ra first started going off last year is because Craig Reynolds was a running back. So that's just something to think about, too. That's a whole different passing attack that's going to be coming this year. I think he's a good wide receiver, but I'm a little down on him. So
It's unpredictable right now, I think is the best way to describe it. Because like you said, St. Brown was great, and he could still be great, but there's too many question marks about the situation. And one thing, like with the two groups that I just showed you, Waddle and Herbert are going in a similar range, and Prescott and St. Brown are going in a similar range. So it just kind of shows you went in the situation there where you picked the wide receiver that was higher and the quarterback that was lower. So good old-fashioned late-round QB action there.
Yeah.
But it's value comparison, and it's going to be kind of the same for these next three that I go over with you. Is the first two players are going in the same spot, and the second two players are going in the same spot. So it's a nice comparison of the tiers. All right, so the next one we got is Rashad Bateman and Josh Jacobs, and Miles Sanders and Cortland Sutton.
Oof. Bateman and Josh Jacobs.
Ooh, that's not what I expected.
Oh no! Like I said, Cortland Sutton. I think is going to be good, but there's then again, that is an offense right now that is high powered, and we don't know who's going to be number one. Sounds like Sutton's going to be the guy, but also I think there's Josh Jacobs. We talked about him every year. Lately, he's been the past 2 years. He seems kind of well, I guess 2 years ago he was a first round pick in most leagues. Last year he dropped down in the depth charts a little bit, but I think I don't remember what his exact finish was, but it was pretty good. He still put up 1,000 yards. Yeah. Miles Sanders, yes, run heavy offense, but that touchdown. I mean, I'm higher on Miles Sanders than most this year, but that touchdown just burns. He just hasn't scored a whole lot, and we'll see. I mean, could be Kenny G this year even. They could get Gainwell a little bit more involved, but. No, I think there's a bigger chance, more production. Well, and Bateman is right now looking like the only wide receiver for the Ravens. I don't know if you heard. Sounds like James Proche is going to be the number 2 guy. I did talk about that really, really early on for the guys that really listened, and it seems like he's the number 2 guy right now. Devin Duvernay, we kind of figured would stay at the role he's got, more the special teamer. Maybe some mix-in plays, but yeah. I mean, Garrett, do you think the Ravens are going to bring in a veteran? I feel like they have to.
It would make a lot of sense, especially I don't even know who all is still out there for free agents right now.
Well, okay, here's a name, big guy last year in free agency, and his name has just not been tossed around at all. I feel at all lately, and he's so athletic and such a good guy. And I think he would fit perfectly in this role. Will Fuller. Why have we not heard about Will Fuller at all?
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, that totally slipped my mind. Why is he still not signed? That's kind of crazy.
I mean, he's not old. 28. I guess his injuries are just probably, that's the one fear. But I feel like he's going to go cheap. And he's shown he was a top 10 wide receiver or a top 10 fantasy wide receiver when he was on the Texans there last year. When he had Deshaun, he was wide receiver 9 before he got that suspension.
Yeah, well, and I mean, now that you say that, we have Odell, we have Will Fuller, we have Julio Jones, Manny Sanders, Cole Beasley, Albert Wilson is still out there. So there are some veterans that are still.
Is Albert Wilson still out there? I thought he got signed to the Vikings.
Did he?
I think he might have been a late signing for the Vikings here.
Ooh, he was. You're right.
Yeah, and
with the Vikings,
and it's that they actually have talked about. I just was reading something the other day. There's a battle for the wide receiver 3 role right now. Everybody was thinking it'd be KJ Osborne. I still think it's probably going to be KJ Osborne. Yeah. But that BC Johnson, if you remember him from 2 years ago. He's the one who beat out Justin Jefferson to start the year.
Yeah, and he had a lot of hype going into the season. I bought into some of that because the opportunity was there. It'd be interesting if maybe it's just he's a really good preseason practice player, but
maybe they're hyping him up so they could trade him type deal. Hopefully get something for that, but I don't really know. But.
All right, so let's keep moving here. My next 2, we got our David Montgomery and Mike Williams, or Michael Pittman and Gibson.
Ooh. I like the Pitmaster right away. But then once you put Gibson in there, I'm just going with Montgomery and Mike Williams. Yeah, you got a big boom bust guy with Mike Williams, wide receiver 5 for the first 5 weeks last year. But there's a difference between I am off on Gibson this year. It sounds like for sure it's gonna be RVBC. We knew McKissick's back. That third down roll is gonna be locked in there for that. And now you get bringing a huge back in Brian Robinson in. The one thing that gets going for him was he got touchdowns. Well, we don't know about that anymore. And I mean, I think there's a bigger drop off there. And Monty is super underrated, undervalued. I would feel like he finishes like a RB2 every single every year. I think he's been like RB2, and every year he's drafted just below that or right around that range. But he's like a solid floor guy. The Bears are still going to pound the rock. You hear a lot about Khalil Herbert possibly taking over the role. That so I've heard two different things. The Bears could possibly give Herbert the ball this year because he's cheap, Montgomery's on his 4th year. They're not going to pay him. They're going to see what they got before they do something like that. I really don't believe that. I think Montgomery's still going to be the guy. They're going to run the guts out of him, basically, and see what happens. So, but yeah, I like the Montgomery and Mike Williams. And I think Mike Williams has a higher floor, too.
Yeah.
Or a higher ceiling, I should say. But
all right. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that group, too. I would lean that direction myself. And Montgomery and Pittman are going at identical spots, 35 and 36. And then Williams and Gibson are also very close. It's just funny to compare these ranges and, which guys you end up kind of focusing in on.
Yeah.
Montgomery is pretty underrated when it comes to pass catching game as well. The past 2 seasons, he's got 50 and 40 passes, so it's nice to know that he can add that level to his game. All right, the last 2 I have are quarterback tight end pairings. So in one, I have Kyle Pitts and Kirk Cousins, and the other is Josh Allen and Hunter Henry.
Oof.
Yeah, this one was kind of tough.
So Kyle Pitts, I believe, couldn't finish the tight end 1 this year. I don't think that's like out of the park take there. Kelsey obviously is probably the front runner for it. Kirk Cousins, though, like you mentioned the last time, he doesn't win big games, so that's why everybody just got the bad taste in his mouth, like type deal. For fantasy relevancy, he's like always right there on the fringe of like a QB1. He's
gets it done.
Yeah, he does get it done. Josh Allen, though, obviously QB1 2 years running, probably going to be a top 3 quarterback if healthy again this year.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hunter Henry, I kind of lean probably towards the Allen and Henry, which that actually hurts, to say that. But I kind of talked about how I don't think his TD efficiency is going to be as high still, Hunter Henry's. But he's one of those guys though that since he's been in the league though, and we saw him take fantasy take football relevance, he's been so consistently average for fantasy. I think he's been probably right around that tight end 10 the past 3 years, I feel like. And I feel like he's probably going to end up right around there again this year.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know. But see, the thing is Pitts is probably going to be a top 4 tight end. And so, like we said, the tier, the drop-off. And it's probably going to be quite a bit points differential between them. But I feel like you can float with Henry and take it better off with Allen. I feel like he's going to win you more weeks.
Yeah, and I think in this situation, I could see the argument going both ways. Especially you have the steady nature of Cousins. You have the upside of Pitts, what he showed you last year. I mean, Pitts hardly scored any touchdowns last year. If he did, he could have really vaulted himself.
Yeah,
up.
still put up 1,000 yards. So.
Josh Allen, back-to-back QB1 seasons. I mean, if you get him, you're pretty much drafting him with the knowledge that he has a really, really good shot at going top 3 again this year for quarterbacks. And that always gives you an advantage because QBs, as much as we don't like to draft them super high, the points advantage you get from having a top dog really does kind of set you ahead.
I guess especially depends what kind of league you're into.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a 12-man or more, I might lean towards the Kirk Cousins one a little bit more, or the Josh Allen one more, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in one with 10-man or less, then you probably would rather have that star tight end, that power tight end type deal. Yeah. But anything lower, where quarterbacks are really tough to get, a good top solid quarterback, it'd probably be better for the Allen one.
Yeah.
But so
all right. Well, that was kind of fun running through those.
Yeah.
It is interesting to compare those different ranges of players, which, I mean, that's why, you hear more things about tier-based drafting are coming out these days, and it's being kind of more touted as the recommended way of doing things. If you go yourself right now and you go on Fantasy Pros, they have automated tiers set up right now in their ranking systems for ECR. And I think it's a really helpful way, if you ever want to set up, you can also set up your own rankings on there and set up your own tiers. So what this kind of does is it gives you a visual of okay, I'm coming around the turn and I might have pick 8, but I have one wide receiver left in my higher tier, and I have about 3 or 4 running backs that are in my next tier down. Okay, well, if you know that going into your turn, you can grab that wide receiver and know that there's a better chance that one of those 3 running backs from that tier are coming back to you. It's just a good way to kind of visualize, the groups of players that you're getting and, what your team makeup might look like. But there's a bunch of different ways to use that. And, there's the resources out there for you guys to go and check that out. But that being said, we'll jump on to kind of the bulk and guts of our show here. We'll start going through our pass again. That's our pick, avoid, sleeper. And we're going to start today with the Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams. So as the last few episodes have gone, I've kind of give you guys a rundown of the depth chart and which spot at each position these guys are going. So I'll do that here. With the Rams, we have at quarterback Matt Stafford. He's QB 11. Running backs Cam Akers, running back 18. Darrell Williams 42. Kyron Williams 83. At wide receiver, Cooper Kupp, number 1. Allen Robinson, wide receiver 24, Van Jefferson 63, and Tutu Atwell 154. Tight end is Tyler Higbee at TE 18. Caleb, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So this was probably, obviously, being Super Bowl champs, a high-powered offense. This is one of the better teams I figured for picking on. Mm-hmm. And my guy that I like to pick, I'm trying to get for his value right now, is Allen Robinson. You saw me move up in a dynasty league here. Got that stack with Matt Stafford, and the only reason being, like I just feel Allen Robinson, still 25. That's pretty high up. You're drafting him as a low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3, or 24. Sorry. As his ECR right now. And with that being said, though, this is what I personally feel like. Allen Robinson is going to step right into the same kind of role that Odell Beckham Jr. had last year. And Odell Beckham Jr. was very fantasy relevant, especially towards the end when he really started figuring out the offense. And Allen Robinson had one down year and a bad Chicago offense. It was bad last year, let's be honest. It was only guy who had over 1,000 yards was Darnell Mooney in the receiving game. And we've seen Robinson, though, put up top 15 wide receiver seasons like 3 or 4 different times. It's not like this guy is not good. Like, he's good. He got paid, too. The Rams went out and they gave him a 3-year, $45 million contract. Looks really cheap, actually, now compared to some of these contracts for a wide receiver like him. He's not that old, though. He's 28 years old. That's in, the prime for, if you're, you're right at the, probably at the peak of your prime for wide receivers, maybe towards the bit of the end. But he's still, young enough where he's going to produce. And so I just feel like it's a safe pick. I feel like the Rams are going to throw the ball. They proved it last year. They like to throw the ball a lot. You're going to have probably 3 or 4 guys getting targeted. They're going to run 3 wide receiver sets a lot. Cooper Kupp probably going to be in your slot a little bit. Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson outside unless they get somebody else in there, which we don't know about. Odell. We'll see how that all... Yeah, Odell goes there. This definitely changes.
That would shake up the depth chart for sure. But
yeah,
that's a very skeptical thing right now.
Yeah, that would totally change. But yeah, for right now, I feel like for value, I feel like it's a safe spot to pick Allen Robinson, and I feel like I can scoop him up for that value right now where he's at. My avoid, now this is where I get it's kind of the same way, where at his value right now, I do not want him, and it's Cam Akers. I feel like he's in that RB dead zone, and I feel like part of the RB dead zone, he's the worst, in my opinion, for that RB dead zone. So guys that are on the same range right now of him are actually a little bit lower, are Travis Etienne, Breece Hall. We talked about those 2 guys earlier, and I feel like both those guys have a higher ceiling right now. We haven't seen them play in the NFL yet. They're RB1s on their offense. Cam Akers last year came in at the RB1 after his Achilles tear. Yes, he rushed back into it, but 2.6 yards per carry is horrible. And he just got shut down in the Super Bowl, too, if you remember. And Darrell Henderson actually has one of the highest yards per carry in the NFL last year. I think it was 5.5 or right around there. And I feel like as the season goes on, we're going to see probably a little bit more RBBC because they were also pumped to get Kyron Williams in the draft. Pass catching back out of Notre Dame. Like, you saw, like, McVay, if you saw the draft when they were all ecstatic to get their guy there. And I think that's because they want somebody to be more of a pass catcher. Akers showed a little bit of the pass catching game. Darrell Henderson, we didn't see as much. He's more of a pure runner. But I feel like it's going to be a little bit more laid out. And I just feel like at that dead zone there, I just would rather draft a wide receiver or draft those other two guys.
All right. Let me ask you a question about Cam Akers. So, A, do you think his production late in the playoffs, like his stats and his production that he achieved, do you think it was due to the fact that he came back injured?
Yes.
Too soon?
Yes.
If he did not come back at all, would you feel differently about his ranking right now?
Oh no, I'd probably be just as questionable because we don't know. Achilles tears. We haven't seen anybody come back and be productive right away. Like it's not, especially with running backs. You've seen a couple wide receivers come back and be okay after that, but running backs is a completely different story. Took Devonta Foreman 3 years to maybe it's because he wasn't getting his chance or whatnot, but I feel the same way about James Robinson this year. The fact that James Robinson's even getting drafted, like in somewhat round 8 or round 9ish, I think that's just crazy because I don't know what he'll be like. He tore it right at the last I think it was the second to last game, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was
late.
Yeah, and sorry, that's a whole other story there. But I personally, the Achilles tear is just I'm okay with not having.
And that's the exact point that I wanted to bring up today is Achilles tears. Kevin Durant came back. We got that in the NBA.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't have any examples other than Foreman, which, he showed he was okay, but it was like 3-4 years.
Yeah.
And, Cam Akers, yes, he was a second-round pick. He showed, some promise as a rookie. But it wasn't like he took over the backfield as a rookie either. It was late in the season. He had a good stretch into the playoffs this rookie season. And then last year, he did tear it early. So you would have hoped that, at the start of the season this year, you get some good camp reports. Maybe you have some promise going into the season. But he shows up in the playoffs last year and, obviously pretty mundane performance. Very just a guy. And, after a bit, it was like, all right, why are they still giving him carries? He doesn't look good out there. Now, you see him and he's going at 18 and he's going ahead of a lot of good running backs. And I would like to see him probably down another 12 spots at RB30, maybe around the Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Kareem Hunt, Tony Pollard area. That makes more sense to me than it does where he's going against David Montgomery, Ezekiel Elliott, Antonio Gibson, Breece Hall, Travis Etienne. That's the kind of group he's around right now. It's like, man, there's too many question marks. He was also my avoid.
Okay. Well, So it's funny. It is nice to see the tampering of Cam Akers' value go down a little bit because you remember right after the Super Bowl win. Remember you sent me, Garrett. I know a little off subject here, but you sent me I think it was a Fantasy Pros thing. And I was talking about the top 10 dynasty running backs, and he was 8 on the list.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, why is he on there? There's easily 10 more guys I'd rather have in dynasty, especially in redraft. And he was getting drafted crazy high, and that's really settled a little bit because I think people are figure out he was not that good when he was back. Might have been all rush, but that's the thing there. But my sleepers, getting into those, I actually have 2, but I'm just gonna mainly talk about one. And my sleeper that I had on this team is actually Van Jefferson.
Ooh, that's mine.
And wide receiver 63 right now. So he's getting drafted around Sterling Shepard. And speaking of Achilles tears, Sterling Shepard had an Achilles tear. Supposedly should be ready beginning of the year. We don't really know about that. I expect him probably to be on the PUP list, but don't know for sure. But Van Jefferson put up 800 yards last year. A sneaky 800 yards. I would say. Not many receptions, but he's a touchdown guy. He's a boomer bust. Van Jefferson's I think he's a good guy you grab towards the end of your draft. That's what all sleepers are about. They're towards the end of your draft, and they're guys that are going to make a difference on not week. I mean, hopefully week-to-week basis, but win you a couple weeks here and there. And I think Jefferson's one of those guys you can play based on opportunity or matchups or whatnot. Like,
Yeah.
I think he's a good guy to store for a while.
Definitely, I feel like he's a great guy to have on your bench, and to draft late in the drafts, like because you're getting him in the 150 range right now, which is super super late. So if you add him late in your draft, obviously, Matt Stafford last year showed that he can support. He supported 2 wide receivers very heftily. And then there was a third, because it was between him and Odell halfway through the season, or him and Robert Woods at the start of the season.
Yes.
And they all kind of performed pretty well. He took a step up for sure from his rookie season, and he was a second-round pick as well. So he went from only 19 receptions his rookie year, barely kind of seeing the field, barely being out there, to, he had 50 receptions last year, and he clipped off at 16 yards per reception, which, I mean, that's pretty high.
Yeah.
So he's always been the field stretcher, the guy who opens things up for them. He catches a lot of the long balls, and with Odell leaving, and you add Allen Robinson, and I know you're high on Allen Robinson, but Allen has also had a lot of ups and downs throughout his career. If we see that Van has stepped into that position and he's kind of taking the reins of the number 2. I don't think it's completely out of the question. I do think that Allen Robinson is the more highly touted receiver out there. But Van showed enough last year, and he went on a good stretch where he was scoring some long, nice touchdowns. So he's definitely a nice guy to have on your bench and a good addition late in your draft. So I had him as my sleeper as well. So it seems like we're pretty synced up on these guys.
I will. Yeah, I will. To let you go left your pick.
All right. So left in my turn, I have my pick because that's it. My pick for the Rams was Cooper Kupp.
Take it easy. I get
it. It might seem like a slam dunk, but honestly, I think there's a legitimate argument you can make for Cooper Kupp at number 1 overall. That's how strongly I feel about him. For those of you who don't know, Cooper Kupp had the best fantasy season of all time in history for wide receivers. That's the guy you're returning. There's nobody who's ever scored more points at the receiver position than Cooper Kupp did last year. You have, Jonathan Taylor had a great stretch down the season, and, he was a great running back 1 last year. But if we compare it to running back 1s and the number 1 overall player in years past, the points he scored wasn't nearly as high as years past. It wasn't as high as Kamara the year before. It wasn't as high as CMC the year before that. If we want to look at, there's a good legitimate argument for Taylor. He's the number 1 guy right now, and there's a good argument for Henry. There's a good argument for CMC. But if you want safety with your first pick, which you can't win your draft in the first round, but you can lose it. I love that saying. I love it.
Yeah.
Cooper Kupp seems like a slam dunk. You go, he's great mind meld with Stafford, and he was the MVP of the Super Bowl. Cooper Kupp was an absolute freaking animal last year. And
22 touchdowns, I think it was, through the course of the year.
It's just, I'm never going to fault anybody for taking a guy with that much talent. So, he's my pick for that reason, because no matter where you pick him in your draft, I think it's a good pick.
So I got a question for you. Mm-hmm. So I've seen multiple things talking about it, and I think there's a legitimate case. I know what you're talking about, Cooper Kupp at 101. And I think, and if I was choosing right now, I would have a very tough time choosing between Cooper Kupp, me personally, and CMC over JT. And the reason being is, like you said, Cooper Kupp had the best fantasy season of all time. So that right away is he should be there. Mm-hmm. At the same time, CMC, when healthy, yes, I know the last 2 years have sucked, but when healthy, he averages the most fantasy points per game of all time. So it's like, and then, like you said, Jonathan Taylor, I feel like his are a little skewed too, because that Buffalo Bills game, remember that one, 53 points or whatever he put up in fantasy, 4 touchdowns, that's a difference maker right there too. But I feel like the two guys.
Don't forget about Henry. Henry, through the first 8 games of the season before his injury last year, was colossal. He was on a pace of probably over 400 carries, and that was just unprecedented what the volume he was getting. So there's good arguments for all 3 of those running backs for sure. But
all right, we won't dig any more into this, so we'll move on to the next team. Seattle Seahawks.
Seattle Seahawks. All right, with a big trade this year, shipping Russell Wilson out of town. You're out of here. All right, at QB, I got Drew Lock, QB 34. Geno Smith, QB 37. Running back, Rashad Penny at running back 29. Ken Walker at 33. And Chris Carson down at 70. Wide receiver, I'm just going to cover 3. DK Metcalf at 16. Tyler Lockett at wide receiver 37, and D. Eskridge, the second-round pick from last year, down at 116. And he didn't do much last year, but I just wanted to, let's not forget about him because he was a second-round pick. And then tight end, they have Noah Fant traded from the Broncos. He's at tight end 17.
How about Mr. Big Contract, Will Dissly?
Big Montana.
He got 3 years, $24 million for a backup blocker.
they brought him back. They do like his blocking game. Problem with Will Dissly is he is oft injured, and as a blocker, Seattle feels like a deep, dark black hole for a passing offense this year because you're looking at Drew Lock, who had good receivers last year, and in Denver, and he wrecked every good receiver out there. And then you have Geno Smith, who's been just a journeyman. So with that, I am going to start with my avoid, which this year it is Tyler Lockett.
Mine too.
I am avoiding him. There is not a draft where I will take him. Right now he's going as wide receiver 37, which, he's been a top, 15 receiver the last 2 years.
Yeah, he's at least top 20. I mean, so.
And it's not that he can't have value. It's not that this offense, with DK is probably going to get keyed in on. There's too much unpredictability with what's going to happen with these passers and how things are going to shake out that I think Tyler Lockett's also getting older. And a lot of his success was based off of his chemistry rather than his physical prowess. So if he doesn't have that chemistry with the quarterback and he's going in with these 2 guys are shaky, I don't think he has the athleticism and the physical nature to make up for bad passes. So it's not like he's going to out-muscle, he's not going to out-jump, he's not going to out-speed or bull rush any of these defenders to go and get the ball. He's a small guy, and he did a good job getting open on long balls. So maybe he's going to catch some.
I think that
here and there, but it's going to be unpredictable.
Yeah, I think it all depends on who the starting quarterback is there for the long ball part too. That's a big factor. I'll let you keep going though. I don't want to butt into here. So.
Yeah, and when Geno Smith came in for those games that Russ was out, he hyper targeted DK, which kind of leads me to a different route here. Is I actually have DK as my sleeper, which sounds kind of weird because he is going earlier in drafts. And sleeper in your typical sense means a guy who's usually going pick 75 or later. But DK right now, he's he's always been a top dog in the receiver room. He's going at wide receiver 16, and overall it's where are you at? 46th overall is where he's at for ECR. The other guys that are around him are guys like Mike Williams, Brandon Cooks, Cortland Sutton. So he's starting to fall down into this range where there are these guys that you're hoping keep moving up or have upside. DK is in this offense, and I don't think that they are going to be a high passing offense because they haven't been. And I don't think they're going to be a high powered offense because the quarterbacks are bad. I think they're going to be playing from behind because they are a bad team. And with the way Geno Smith hyper-targeted DK, I think Drew Lock could do something similar when he's out on the field, and DK could actually end up returning value on where he's being drafted, which kind of feels gross right now. But as we get closer to the season, I have a feeling his ADP is just going to keep dropping because you're going to get your regular off the couch fantasy football guys, the guys who aren't paying attention in June and July and April, and they're going to be like, oh, Russell Wilson's out of town, screw these guys, they're going down. And then you're going to watch the ADPs for guys like this, guys like DK. He's going to keep falling, and if he drops down to the 50s, all of a sudden we might end up with an opportunity where, he could be a value at his ADP. So that's why I feel like in a sense he could be a sleeper.
Yeah, I'd agree with you.
It feels weird to say.
No, I think it's right though. I think it's right.
Yeah.
Who's your pick then?
My pick is Ken Walker. And it might just be my obsession with rookie running backs. But honestly, what it is, on my end is, so Rashad Penny right now is going as running back 29. And Rashad Penny, when he's been on the field, he's been great. He's been fantastic. And, the way he closed out the season last year was fantastic. He won people leagues. Looking at his freaking stat line from last year, it's wild. He was getting, 10, 16, 11, 17, 25, 23 carries, and he equated that out to, 4 of his last 5 games with over 135 yards each of those games. Big time. He had 26 points, 5 points, 19 points, 31 points, 25 points. That's his last 5 games to close out the season. He was an animal. That being said, I'm not going to overlook the fact that he has been injured every other season in his career, including that year, because he missed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his first 6 games. It's like, man, he just does it every single year, and he's missed more games than he's played. And I don't want to take that guy and rely on him to be a big contributor on my fantasy team. The Seahawks make it clear that they want their identity to be through the run game, right? Even though, DK is a great player, and I just talked him up as much as I could. But Ken Walker coming in from the second round, the second running back off the board, the clear-cut consensus, there were 2 big ones. They got one of those guys. And Ken Walker is going to step in a position where they want to get the ball to their running backs. I don't think that there's a situation where Penny takes, the lion's share of the carries, even when both of them are on the field. So if I think, in my best judgment from Penny's previous history up till now, I don't think Penny plays the full season, which most running backs don't, but I don't think he plays, even the majority of the snaps in most of those games. I think Ken Walker ends up taking the lead role, and really kind of runs with it. And, he's got a great opportunity to improve on where he's being drafted at running back 33.
I agree. I should say I don't agree. It's kind of funny because we literally talk on the same exact guy, which I know probably bores you guys that are listening, but little different variants though. My avoid Tyler Lockett don't have to go too much into it. Garrett hit the nail on the head there. All right, and then my pick is DK Metcalf. My pick, kind of like you said, sleeper though, because I like his value right now. DK easily has I shouldn't say easily, but has a chance to return you top 12 wide receiver. I would say he has a chance to finish as a wide receiver 1, and it mainly relies on me to quarterback play. If Geno Smith is a quarterback, I feel a lot more comfortable taking DK because of the fact that they have a little connection already, and like you said, we saw him just pepper him with targets. And I think it's going to be that same way if Geno is quarterback. Drew Lock, we've seen Drew Lock time and time again for Denver, and it's sickening kind of because watching how the wide receivers like just loaded rooms and just not coming through, from the beginning of Cortland Sutton, Emmanuel Sanders, and then just Noah Fant, and that is. So I really won't go too much about DK Metcalf. Like again, you talked about a lot there. The one I will talk a little bit about is my sleeper though is Rashad Penny. And so I liked how you talked about Ken Walker as your pick, and I feel the complete opposite way, only because of the coaching. Having Pete Carroll there, we've seen in the past, Pete Carroll is loyal to his players. Like, it's just weird, kind of. And it scares me even the fact that Chris Carson is still, like, considered, like, on the roster type deal. I doubt he ever plays again with his neck injury. Like, he's got braced. You saw the x-ray. And if you didn't, I would recommend take a look at it because I doubt he ever plays again because, like, he's got literally a metal brace in his neck. But being that fact, Rashad Penny, go back to last year. Alex Collins came in, filled in nicely for Chris Carson. Not great, but nicely. Rashad Penny, injured all the time. He comes back, just starts getting carries right away because he was been there for so long. He's on his 4th year, just starts getting loaded with carries. First round pick, Rashad Penny was, just so you guys know. You go all the way back to when Rashad Penny was drafted. He was a first round pick. Chris Carson, 7th round pick, was there the year before. Chris Carson got like all the carries that year. Rashad Penny was benched. Like he got a couple carries here and there, but then again he was injured too for some of it. But Chris Carson got the lion's share of the work. And I truthfully think, like, yes, Ken Walker is their guy in the future, but Rashad Penny is also a top 10 paid running back this year, and they're going to give him the ball. And so that's my whole take on it is I think with value right now, it's kind of a cluster, but for the value right now of Rashad Penny, you draft him, he could return you top 10 running back. If he gets what he did last year and gets kind of the same carries and touches and produces and stays healthy, he is going to be a monster again. We saw he's a freak when he gets the ball, but it's just he's been injured the entire time.
Yeah. And one thing I do have to say about Penny is he doesn't need that many carries to really explode in terms of the stat sheet and yards.
No.
He's always clipped off at a high yards per attempt. At his career, he's at 5.6. Last year, he was 6.3.
Yeah.
Like, when he gets the ball, he's been efficient with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I caught another guy. So I actually had 2 avoids because I had a feeling you were going to talk Tyler Lockett. I know we've talked about Lockett before. I really won't go too far, but Noah Fant is an avoid of mine. Yes, he's getting drafted really late at tight end, but he has that chemistry with Drew Lock, and he did produce. So it doesn't make me think that he's not going to produce again type deal. That's just the way I feel about that. I won't go too farther than that. But, yeah, Seahawks, like you said, I really don't feel like great grabbing many Seahawks right now. Like with value, like DK Metcalf, I wouldn't mind if I can get him as my wide receiver 2. I
would feel much better at a wide receiver 2.
Yeah, but right now he's going at that fringe wide receiver 1. So if I draft, it all depends what my strategy is, I guess, there too. Rashad Penny, I would feel very comfortable. He's my RB3, knowing I could have high upside player I could either trade or keep type deal. So,
that's fair. And where you're getting them in the draft right now, you could realistically get Metcalf as your 2, and you could get Penny as your 3rd running back. So that's a good example of how your roster makeup would look better in those situations.
Yes.
All right.
Great. Oh.
Well, let's jump ahead here. We have Arizona Cardinals. We have they were a team of 2 halves of the season. They started out hot and they fizzled hard. At quarterback, they have Kyler Murray. He's QB5 this year, or right now on ECR. Running backs, James Conner at ECR 14 for running back. Darrell Williams at 56, and Eno Benjamin returning at running back 92. Wide receivers, Marquise Hollywood Brown at wide receiver 23, DeAndre Hopkins at 36. He's got a 6-game suspension. Rondale Moore down at 60, and A.J. Green at wide receiver 76. Then at tight end, they have Zach Ertz returning, tight end 10, and Trey McBride, the top rookie this year, at 32.
All right, I'll start off with this one. And this one was a tough one for me due to the fact of I liked guys that I could pick. I liked my sleepers, and I really didn't have many guys I wanted to avoid.
Yeah, I felt very similar on this team.
Yeah, because I feel like they're all very equally valued right now. I feel like
I feel like the price is appropriate.
Yes.
For a lot of these guys.
I would totally agree. And so I'll go with my easy pick first. I got a feeling I know who you're going to talk about, so I'm going to go. I had 2 guys here. And this guy was my number 1, James Conner. Right now, he's at RB 14. I think he's RB 15 in PPR, and which I really don't get that fact though, like of how he's RB, like how he drops in PPR ECR rankings, because we saw it in the year he had these pass catching abilities. Is your half PPR, Garrett, or you're getting yours off, or with PPR?
I usually pull it. I'll always half PPR.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, I was looking at PPR earlier. So half PPR, he's running back 14, and James Conner last year was a freak at scoring touchdowns. I do see that declining a little bit, but also Chase Edmonds was good when he got the ball. That first half of the year, Chase Edmonds had really high yards per carry and yards, but just no touchdowns because James Conner would steal them all. But then at the end of the year, I mean, it completely switched. It was just mainly James Conner's backfield, especially because Edmonds got hurt. And they didn't do a lot to boost that backfield. They brought Darrell Williams in, who we saw was good last year for the Chiefs. I do think Darrell Williams is a good backup, but everything it sounds like right now is actually Benjamin sounds like he's going to be the RB2. It seems like Kingsbury likes him a little better. I don't know if that's just kind of that preseason hype type deal. Benjamin, we did see get a couple carries last year here and there, and he's a bull. If you remember that, he had one big, huge run last year where he absolutely just trucked a guy and broke a 50-yarder. It was his only highlight really this season. And I was like, ooh, I scoop him up, and I did. It didn't pay off. But
did pay off.
They did draft Keontae Ingram out of USC. Probably going to be RB4 going into the year. Practice squad. Don't really expect much out of him. So James Conner is my pick. I just feel like at his, this is, again, value type thing. He finished as an RB5, I think it was, last year in PPR scoring. RB5 or RB6 it was. I can't remember exactly. But it was definitely top 10. It was top 10 RB. And right now he's going outside the top 10 RBs, which I don't get because his situation is actually better. It's, no Chase Edmonds, like I said. So it's actually better. And I don't get how they expect it. And we saw him get more involved in the passing game, which is huge because in Pittsburgh he was a great PPR back. He had, when that year he filled in for Le'Veon on his holdout in 2018. James Conner was a monster. And I think we can kind of maybe see that again this year. I think it's going to be relatively same production out of him. There's maybe a little less touchdowns, but probably more yards, I feel like, because he's going to get more touches handed his way. I'm going to go on my sleeper then right away. I'll say my avoid. I have avoid question mark at the end. And my sleeper is Zach Ertz. And this kind of sounds weird because he is tight end 8 or 9, I think he is.
10.
10. Okay, tight end 10. And I know that sounds weird because he's getting drafted as a top 10 in that position, but Zach Ertz was tight end 3 last year when he got shipped over into Arizona. He showed instant chemistry right away with Kyler Murray, and on those games DeAndre Hopkins was out. He was the red zone threat. He got the red zone targets, and even Hollywood Brown's there this year. Hollywood Brown's not much of a red zone threat. He's a bomb, get a lot of yards, yak guy. Zach Ertz is going to be that safety blanket for Kyler Murray, I expect. And having him drafted so late, I think he is one of those guys, though, who is on that fringe of that tier 2 of wide receivers. Like, tier 2, maybe dipping in the tier 1, and I think early on he's going to be really good for him. And I don't expect Trey McBride, even though he got that draft capital this year, I don't expect him to be much this year just due to the fact that he is a rookie tight end. Maybe at the end of the year, depending on how the season's going and all. But Zach Ertz is my sleeper right now that I have.
So let me hit you with this quick. The last 4 games of the season, which Hopkins was out of all these, and I know Ertz was there for longer, but the last 4 games of the season, he had 11 targets, 13 targets, 9 targets, and 10 targets. And those were all like, not crazy games, but it goes to show you that, I had gotten to the point where I had thought Ertz was, put out to pasture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eagles are done with him. They're like, all right, Goddard's better. Ertz is pretty much washed now. Let's ship him out, get him out of here. Cardinals are like, all right, they shipped out a pick for him. But it's just surprising the way he was able to turn it around there. And now, like you said, he walks into a position where Marquise Brown is a field stretcher. And Hopkins is out the first 6 games. And Rondale Moore, while he did flash in space at times last year, he didn't show enough to be a possession receiver. And A.J. Green is really, he showed last year he's starting to get long in the tooth. And A.J. Green showed up better than I expected. But yeah. I do think Ertz ends up being the guy who really gets more catches than you'd expect to open up the season with Hopkins being out for a bit.
Totally agree with you. That's how I feel. Like I'm saying he's going to be an early guy. I don't know how he'll be when Hopkins returns. I feel like he's going to be decreased at all, but definitely a little bit better. And so the guy that I actually have for a void, and like I said, it's a void question mark. I almost want to throw him in the sleeper category. That's how I feel like about it. But he's the one guy the only reason I say void is because I'm probably not going to draft him. I'm going to let him hit waivers. And that's A.J. Green. And so the mere fact of that DeAndre Hopkins is out that first 6 weeks. And I'm not saying DeAndre Hopkins' value is bad right now because it's not. He's going as a wide receiver 3. If you have 2 stud wide receiver 2s and I don't know, whatever else you draft with, once he returns, you're going to have 3 top wide receivers. Even though DeAndre Hopkins' yards slipped a little bit last year, he was still just getting touchdowns. He was wide receiver 9 before he had that big injury.
In the games he played, he was great last year.
He had 8 or 9 touchdowns last year, which it's just crazy to show you that what do they call it, the Hail Mary, or not the Hail Mary? Oh, no, what was the one that Hopkins had that Hail Mary the first year? He just snagged it out of there. And that's how I feel like Kyler's kind of yep, screw it, Hopkins is down there somewhere. He just jumps up out of nowhere. And Hopkins, it sounds like they really played out his surgery really well. They knew they had that bad half of the second half of the season, so they didn't want him to rush back, obviously, because he had that MCL tear. And it sounds like right now they're progressing with his. They're using these 6 weeks of suspension. They're going to use it really well. They're really working him in nice and slowly. Not going to rush him back because there's no point. And it sounds like he is recovered well and fully. So I expect Hopkins to be good when he comes back. I expect Brown and Hopkins to be very valuable when he comes back. So A.J. Green, the only reason I said avoid is because I think he's going to be something for 6 weeks. And then I don't think he's going to be much after that.
Yeah.
He did rack up 850 yards last year.
Better than expected.
Yeah, but then again, it's just he didn't have many touchdowns, and then he only had 3. But that's because Hopkins was there for most of it, and then Zach Ertz came. Well, you eliminate Hopkins, it's going to be him or Ertz for the red zone targets. They're going to be the 2 big red zone guys. A.J. Green is old, 34, like you said, a little long in the tooth, so 33 I think he might be. But he's still a red zone threat. He's a tall, lengthy X-wide receiver. He's a possession guy. He's going to throw it up. They're going to try to, box him out type deal, which he was supposed to do against Rasul Douglas. Didn't work out too well. But but that's why I said, it's a weird avoid. I just said, I'd rather leave him to waivers and see. If he goes off week 1, yeah, scoop up some $5, grab that guy. Because he's going to be good probably for the next 5 weeks. But
yeah,
I would rather not, just his ADP I know you said we're going off ECR guys for the most part, which is expert consensus ranking, which is probably what we use mainly. But like you said, ADP, he's at 88 in PPR. So I mean, he's not getting drafted. He's down by Will Fuller, Braxton Berrios, like Antonio Brown, other free agents that are two of those guys aren't even on a team. So.
Yeah, and just so you guys know too, I mean, we've covered this a little bit. The reason we try to use ECR right now is ADP is typically right now it's tailored a little bit more towards best ball.
Yeah.
And you're doing a lot of industry drafts, and you're not getting all of your home leagues that everybody else is in quite that settles out the ADP ranking. So ECR right now is probably a touch more accurate, but we're gonna see more changes.
Yeah.
But Caleb, you hit the nail on the head. Looking at the Cardinals for the first time in a long time, like it. Especially after going through each of these divisions, we run into a team where everybody is so appropriately priced on their ranking, where it's like it's hard to have a guy that you dislike. For me, on my avoid, I put Hopkins, and it's not like I wouldn't take him at wide receiver 36. It's that with his 6-game suspension, I know my own history. I struggle drafting guys who are out for the start of the season, on suspensions, but looking at where he's going in his range, he's down at 91, like for his ECR, wide receiver 37. It's like in that range, you're starting to get to a point where you're late enough in your draft that can be your fourth wide receiver, or it could be your first bench player, whatever. And once he's back, if you already have a roster built out ahead of him, you don't necessarily need him right away. So that's a totally different situation than, in years past, Ezekiel Elliott's suspension, where he's still getting drafted high, like other guys who've been out. It just it makes it, bearable to get him where he's at.
And I think sorry, and I didn't mean to get there. And I know you talked about like how when you get the average Joes who do fantasy, not the guys who are probably listening to the podcast. You probably aren't. If you're listening to fantasy right now, you're definitely like into fantasy football. But the guys who just like have home leagues and stuff like that and just draft in September, don't really do too much research, or August, for drafting, he's going to fall probably in ADP again because those are like, suspension, same thing. I don't want him. I got suspension, blah, 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 blah. But in the long-term reality, like you said, if you get him as your wide receiver 3 or 4, you can hold on. DeAndre Hopkins has been a top 10 wide receiver like 5 or 6 years in a row. He's before Devontae Adams really had that breakout. It was between him or Adams, who's the best wide receiver in the league. That's how it was there for a little bit. And so,
and last year he was good in the games he played, and the year before he put up 1,400 yards.
and there's a lot of like if right now too of the fact everybody expects Hollywood Brown to be a monster because he's got the chemistry, the connection with Kyler Murray. He did good last year. But what if Hollywood comes out and he's not that good? Like, then everybody's going to be like, oh, shoot, I want Hopkins. I need Hopkins.
Yeah.
So
their passing offense is struggling without Hopkins. Well, it's tough to know right now. And, we can go into it on and on because, these are great players we're talking about. But looking at my list, I also had Ertz as a sleeper. I can make an argument for Rondale Moore as a sleeper. He's going late enough in drafts where, he showed flashes last year as a rookie. He's going to get opportunity to see the field early on this year. And I think when they didn't sign a second running back right away, it showed that, I'm not necessarily saying that they're going to give Rondale Moore touches in the backfield or anything like that, but they might look to more screen plays, quick plays, stuff that's more around the line of scrimmage to get him the ball in space, because they started doing that at the start of the year last year, and with the spread offense, they're going to find ways to try to get him the ball, especially early on with the 6-game suspension. So I like where he's going. He's so late. He's wide receiver 60, so he's going to be, past your 150 range, one of your last picks in your draft.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely worth it for, pick him, see where he goes the first 3-4 weeks in the season. If he's not doing anything, drop him. Perfect guy, perfect guy to see if he explodes or not and move on.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt you.
Absolutely not. But he is a guy that he could step onto the field, and he's electric enough, he's flashy enough where he could explode.
Yeah.
Also, one of my picks was Darrell Williams. He's down at running back 56. He's signed late. You know, even with with some of these rumors coming out, Darrell showed last year he's good enough of a running back, and you know where you could get him right now if James Conner's injured, like bam, there's your opportunity right now for him to step in.
Yep.
The way he's priced, great guy to grab. I just love the way that every Cardinal is priced right now, right on their ADP or ECR. You got any other touches on the Cardinals before we move on?
No, definitely the most. I would say, like you said, they're right there with like the Chargers with me, like for rankings. Like everybody was balanced out perfectly. Like and like kind of we talked about that earlier with the Chargers. Like I had nobody to avoid the Chargers, and like I said, AJ Green. I think I made more of a probably a thing to grab him as a sleeper than I did avoid him.
Yeah,
like that's why I probably argued more about that. Which, like I said, like on my sheet I put AJ Green question mark like yeah.
Oh, that's funny. All right, well let's jump on to our last team here. We have the San Francisco 49ers. Amidst some QB controversy at quarterback, they have their third overall pick from last year, Trey Lance. He's QB 13, and then they also still have Jimmy Garoppolo, QB 32. I'm going to list him there for now. We'll see if he gets moved. Running back, they have Elijah Mitchell, RB 21, Trey Sermon, RB 67, Jeff Wilson at 73, and Tyrion Davis Price at running back 75. Wide receiver, Deebo Samuel at wide receiver 4, Brandon Ayuk at wide receiver 38. The rest of their guys, I'm really not going to go into because they aren't as relevant.
Not right now.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with this passing offense, and maybe there will be more sleepers. But most of their other guys right now are guys who've been in the league for a few years that haven't shown much.
Yeah.
Last guy on the team is George Kittle at tight end, number 4. I am going to start, and we can both talk about this guy because I know we're going to feel differently, and I saw your sheet. My pick for the 49ers is Elijah Mitchell.
Okay.
So here's my argument for him. The 49ers running back room has been a revolving door. The guy who has gotten the carries has, been a must start for fantasy that week.
Yes.
Whoever the starter is, he's been a must start. Elijah Mitchell had a couple knick-knack injuries that were all kind of here and there throughout the season last year. But he showed up to camp, and after Mostert went down, he was a late pick in the drafts. Everybody was expecting Trey Sermon to take the reins, and, he was the guy. I drafted him high. I was expecting the same thing. Third-round pick, perfect opportunity. And I don't want to fall into that same trap this year with Tyrion Davis Price, where they drafted him again in the third round. You're looking at him, okay, good opportunity. Elijah Mitchell kind of on and off the field last year. But I mostly don't want to lose sight of the fact of how good Mitchell actually was with his touches last year.
He was. He was good.
And, for a fifth-round back coming out, he was a steady rock. And, he clipped off at a 4.7 yards per carry. At 200 carries last year in 11 games, he had just under 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. Not a huge guy in the passing game. He had 20 targets, 19 catches. So he caught the balls that he had. But the games that he played in is the biggest thing that stands out. He had 155 half point PPR fantasy points last year, and which is just under serviceable. Typically, you want your starting running backs to be closer to 200 points on the season. But you look at his carries in the games he was in, most of those games he had 17 or more carries. They are a run-first offense. Mm-hmm. And as they transition with Trey Lance at the helm, they're still going to keep that identity. They still are a zone running back scheme. And Elijah Mitchell's the kind of guy that if he stays healthy throughout the season, you could end up with a true top 5 running back. He could go that kind of nuclear, and it's totally within the realm of possibilities. Now, I totally understand the argument of, he only played in 11 games last year. He missed 2 games, games 3, games 4. Then he missed game 11. Then he missed game 15, 16. It was sporadic injuries throughout the season, and it kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth for what you kind of want, because all of a sudden, if you can't trust him here and there, and he's out for those games, every time he comes back, you have this question mark of, well, is he back all the way healthy or is he not? Well, and that's the crazy part, is because every time he came back, he'd get 20 carries and run for 100 yards. It's like, well, what the heck? I sat you on my bench because, typically a guy gets injured. You don't want to start him the game he comes back because it's a little shaky. So, I had him last year, and I know that there were a lot of, gut punches like that where you're left with too much uncertainty. But I think that his upside is really, really high, and he's the kind of guy that could really have a solid chance, if he stays healthy, at being a top 10 back.
I'll hold my tongue. Go ahead.
Hit me with it, because I know you feel differently. Well, and that's what our viewers want to hear.
Well, yeah, so I guess I'll hop over to me. He's my avoid, and
I know.
I'm strictly going off the fact of stats and of the 49ers offense. Elijah Mitchell was a 6th-round pick last year. I will say draft capital means nothing to Kyle Shanahan. Whoever, and it's funny because I have TDP as my second sleeper on this team. He's not the guy I really wanted to talk about, but he's my second guy. And he's RVE 75, like you said, but that's the whole thing. Past 5 years, there's been a different leading rusher for 49ers. Past 5 years. And it's whoever gets the hot hand, that's who he goes with. And it does work out. They get force-fed the ball a lot, and they produce. Every year, you want whoever the 49ers leading rusher is, you're like, I want him. That's how it's been. Because when Raheem Mostert was good, when Jeff Wilson was there at the end of that 2020 season, he won guys' fantasy leagues. He put up some big points. The year before was Raheem Mostert. The year before that wasn't Frank Gore. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now. But yeah, all the way back. I think the last guy who went 2 years back to back with the leading rusher was Frank Gore. That tells you how long ago it was. So that's why I am fading Elijah Mitchell. He is small. He's a small running back, and that's why he kept getting injured last year. I think it was all little nagging injuries each time. He's a little back. They call him the missile, and it's because he's fast, but at the same time he is small. And I feel like Kyle Shanahan strictly basically came out and said, well, they re-signed Jeff Wilson. They re-signed JaMychal Hasty. They have Trey Sermon still on the roster, who was a 3rd-round pick. They used another 3rd-round pick on another back. And he goes, we went last year with our top 3 backs. Oh, right away. He goes, that's why he drafted Tyrion Davis-Price. And so to me, it's like, I just don't trust that back. I feel like the whole fact, until week 1, basically. Yeah. And Mitchell, like I said, he's in that same range of ETN, Breece Hall, those guys. I'd rather choose those guys because they have a higher upside. That's why he's my avoid.
Yeah. So. Well, and it's so funny because he is the epitome of when he's on the field, he's great. Yeah. So I was wrong. He actually only played in 10 games last year. The 11th, he had nothing across the board. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. No carries, nothing. So maybe he suited up that game but didn't play. But in 5 out of those 10 games, he had over 100 yards rushing. It's like, man, that's most guys don't get over 100 yards throughout the season 5 times. That's just not usually a stat you see. And you have all of your points are right. All of your points are right. I think there are great arguments both ways on what Mitchell could be. And it depends on the amount of risk you want to take and how high you see his upside.
Yeah.
Obviously, like my opinion is that I think he has top 5 upside, and he's the kind of guy that if you do take the risk on, he could pay off in a huge way.
Mm-hmm.
And your argument is that, this offense has been a revolving door. Like, I don't trust that situation, and it's not worth that pick when there's other good guys in that same range.
Yes. Yeah, that's how I feel. So who's your
Totally
avoid? Who's the one guy you don't want?
My avoid in this offense is Brandon Ayuk. I looked around at the rest of the guys we had listed. Trey Lance at 13, I think that's, again, appropriately priced. Like, there are other quarterbacks in that range that have less risk, but he has pretty high upside. So,
rushing
with his rushing, he definitely could step in. We are not hearing great things out of camp again about Trey Lance and Matthews, fatigue, like, not great things. But that doesn't matter because he runs, and that's how quarterbacks are. If they run, they're going to be fantasy relevant. But then it's kind of the same thing. You look at Samuel and Ayuk. Deebo Samuel, wide receiver 4. I think that's appropriate. I think if you want to take him there, he's going to be a big part of the offense again.
Yeah, after what we did last year, that's.
Yeah, even if he doesn't rush as much, I still think he's going to be a focal point in the passing game. And George Kittle is he showed again last year when he's playing, and he's off injured as well. When he's playing, he's a must start. He is a top elite tight end. Ayuk, I have listed as my avoid for the reason is I don't know if I trust Trey Lance's passing, and where there's smoke, there's fire. You hear all these things about Trey Lance's passing. I don't know if I can sit and disregard all these rumors and then say this third option in the passing game is going to return value on fantasy. And at wide receiver 38, you go and you check the guys that are going around him, and it's one of those situations where I just rather turn other directions because it's like, that's where Hopkins is going. You take and stash him. Would you rather take and stash Hopkins, or would you rather take Ayuk as your 4th wide receiver and hope that he turns out? I don't know. Would you rather take Drake London or Christian Kirk, Russell Gage? Like, I would rather turn the other directions, guys that are number 1s on their team or guys who have higher upside.
Yeah.
Ayuk looked good last year. He didn't start great. But down the stretch, he really turned his game around, and he had a solid stretch down there. And he looked good as a rookie. So, I don't think he's necessarily somebody who's going to, be written off forever, but I just don't trust his ADP right now.
No, I think it's safe to say. I have a little bit more to talk about that, but we'll get into who your sleeper is.
My sleeper was Tyrion Davis-Price. He's the least expensive running back you can grab, and that means that if
that's a deep league sleeper. That's yeah. If you're talking about TD, that's the way I felt like because he's going undrafted.
So here's the thing, RB 75. He's not going to be drafted, but if week 1 he gets 15 carries, obviously not crazy.
No,
this offense, it could happen. If he does, spend your fab.
Yes.
Or spend your top waiver pick because it's worth it.
You spent 2/3 of your fab last year on Elijah Mitchell week 1 in one of our and we all just ripped on you because we're like, oh my God. Turned out to be a great move for Garrett. Garrett was a contender all year. So
it's one of those you learn from your mistakes kind of thing, because if you invest in an offense and then you don't end up with the guy that you thought you did. You thought you had Trey Sermon, who'd be a good rotational player in there, and he doesn't end up being the guy. Hey, learn from your mistakes. If week 1 I'm wrong and Elijah Mitchell's out and Tyrion Davis-Price is the guy, trust what you see on the field. Spend your fab, spend your high waiver pick, and go grab the guys, especially in this offense, because Shanahan will pick whoever he picks, and you just have to go with whatever he's choosing that week.
Okay. I agree with you there. All right, so I talked about my avoid already, Elijah Mitchell, and with my picks, I went sweet and I went easy. And I think actually I disagree with you. I think Trey Lance ups the passing game. Jimmy G super safe guy. He doesn't risk passes, doesn't throw a lot of picks. But I also, if you remember that game, Jimmy G is not a good downfield passer. If you remember that, I can't remember, it was a playoff game. Just absolutely airmailed Kyle Juszczyk wide open. It was George Kittle. Time and time again, we keep seeing him make these one-handed snags, just unreal grabs. And it's because Jimmy G overthrows him or something like that across the middle of the field. So I'm saying, if you're going to pick somebody from the 49ers, go with the easy pick, go with the safe pick. These guys, George Kittle, been a safe tight end for a couple of years now. If he's healthy, he's a stud. There's a chance George Kittle could finish as a tight end 1. I don't think anybody can not argue that if he stays healthy all year. It's one of those things. George Kittle's a stud. Deebo Samuel broke out last year and monster in fantasy. Yes, he's not going to probably get his rushing, but also at the same time, he was still good in the passing game. He's been a yak monster since he's been in the league. So, yeah, safe guys, draft them. Sleepers, this is where, this is a team I feel like has some sleepers because literally they only have a couple big guys at each name. They don't have, Brandon Ayuk is a good wide receiver, too. He's not a really, you probably wouldn't put him as a high-class wide receiver, too. They don't have, I think their wide receiver 3 might be either Danny Gray, they drafted in the 3rd or 4th round this year from SMU, or it's going to be Juwan Jennings, who we saw a little bit at the end of last year.
Yeah, and that's who it's listed as right now. If you go on ESPN or look up any depth charts, as Jennings is listed as
Yeah, and he wasn't very fancy relevant.
Well, Trey Lance, like you were saying, he doesn't have to do much to pass Jimmy G. Jimmy G last year had 3,800 yards and 20 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Extremely, extremely underwhelming in the passing game.
Yeah.
So bar is low.
Yeah. And so my sleeper I went with was Brandon Ayuk. And the fact of the reason is at the end of the year, he was getting good. He was getting better. He was horrible to start. If you remember, he was on waivers. My comparison to Brandon Ayuk is Gabe Davis this year. Brandon Ayuk flew up the draft boards last year. He was way up there in ADP because he was a monster at the end of his rookie season. Gabe Davis was a monster in the postseason last year. Now he's flying up the draft boards. Neither of those guys really produced much, though. Brandon Ayuk didn't do a whole lot until the very end of his rookie year. So last year he gets drafted and he crashed right away. Just nothing. He was in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse. And all of a sudden he started getting more touches. And more touches. And we've seen with Brandon Ayuk, when he gets the ball in space, or gets the ball in general, he is a good receiver with the ball. He is a great guy once he has the ball in his hand. And he's not a bad route runner either. So, wide receiver 40, like you said, Garrett, I'd rather have DeAndre Hopkins. Like I said, I am also very loyal to DeAndre Hopkins. He has won me quite a bit of money that way. So, but yeah, I feel like Ayuk, though, he's such a factor right now is that nobody really talking about, and I know I mentioned it 3 podcasts ago, is Deebo Samuel still wants to get traded. You get Brandon Ayuk right now at that range, and if Deebo gets traded, you're like, holy crap, I gotta go with mine. I just got a wide receiver 1. And that's a lot of what ifs. I know it is, but this is the time of year when you can do what ifs, because right now there's nothing to talk about really. And I just want to say this though too. Would you put it on the realm of things, Garrett, Deebo Samuel, I think, has this is last year in contract right now. That's why he's trying to get that extension, I believe. Mm-hmm. So he decides to play this year. Not getting his contract extension. 49ers are not a playoff contender. They turn around, they ship Deebo to a playoff contender for a thing. There you go. Again, Brandon Ayuk, Trey Lance, and they've shown, actually, if you see all the workout videos of Trey Lance, who is he throwing to right now? Brandon Ayuk, because Deebo Samuel is not attending anything. So they're getting that chemistry. So that's the way I think about it. It's I do think he could put up 1,000 yards this year.
No, man. It's so hard because, all right, so even say you take Deebo Samuel and completely remove him from the offense. If I were to look at Ayuk as the number 1 with Kittle there, even in the range he's in, I don't know if I would still pick him ahead of some of those guys that are around. So I still struggle.
Yeah.
But
it's a process. Yeah.
I can see your arguments. I struggle with the question mark that is Trey Lance and the smoke, fire, whole thing. too many rumors right now.
Yeah. So, all right, you guys. Sorry, another long one here, but that's what our divisional breakdown was of the NFC West. A couple powerhouse teams for fantasy, a couple not so powerhouse teams for fantasy. Like I said, it's a tough one to rank. Obviously, it was a lot of fun for us talking about the Rams and Cardinals because those are very high-powered offenses, and 49ers very well could be. It's all on the shoulders of Lance. 49 or Seahawks, we don't expect a whole lot out of there. But with that, we will be talking about the NFC East next week. Should be another fun episode. Garrett and I will get you guys through our pass system, like we've been saying, and we'll go on with that. But Garrett,
yeah, I mean, really excited for the NFC next week or NFC East next week. It's going to be awesome to cover those teams. You know, again, a lot of movement in that division with trades happening. So going to be fun to kind of talk and run over those. But with that being said, thanks everybody for tuning in for another episode, and we look forward to keep kicking these out for you guys. So tune in next time. We'll see you later.